Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RHS Online Industry Insights. Really delighted here tonight to have three alumni. We have Lizzie Greene, who is a group legal advisor for Associated Newspapers. Lizzie left in 2010. We've got Henry Cottam, who's a sales manager for Vocus. And we have Beth Harris, who's an occupational therapist for Cambridge County Council, I apologise, Beth. So the format is very simple. Each person will speak for around 5 minutes about their journey from RHS, their career to date, their career path and why they took the decisions that they did, and potentially the career opportunities within the sector that they work in. And we'll ask them perhaps to give us some top tips for those pupils that are watching about how to make the most out of their time at RHS. So without further ado, and just to say, sorry, that after the three speakers have spoken, we'll do a live Q&A, so please feel free to post your questions into the chat box, and I anticipate that we'll probably last about 45 minutes. So without further ado, we're going to go to Lizzie first. So Lizzie, over to you. Let's hear about your career. Thank you.
Helps if you can hear me. So yeah, thank you very much. I am a group legal advisor for Associated Newspapers. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I got here first, and then I'll explain what my role entails. So yeah, I left RHS way back in and I studied English, religious studies and Spanish for my A-levels, and then went and did an English literature degree, with no idea at that point that I wanted to be a lawyer. Not really any clear idea of what I wanted to do at all, just knew that I loved English and wanted to study it more. And I had a great time and thought about going down the academia route for a while, but decided after doing my finals that I fancied doing something a bit more connected to the real world, but that would use the academic skills that I'd gained as well, and settled on law. So I then did a law conversion course, which is a one-year course you do after your first degree, and then got a training contract to become a solicitor with a firm called Bird Bird. And that's a sort of mid-sized commercial firm based in London. And I chose there because they had specialities in sectors that I was interested in, particularly tech and media. And they also had specialities in intellectual property law, which I was particularly interested in. Some people might know something or nothing about IP, but very briefly, it's to do with protecting, as the name suggests, property that is not tangible. It's not physical things or land, but ideas, essentially. So it covers copyright, patents, which relates to inventions, like new drugs, for example. Yeah, copyright, which is artistic works, so books, films, music, artworks, and trademarks, which is to do with the logos and branding that companies use to show where their goods and services have come from. So I qualified at that law firm, specialising in intellectual property, and I moved about 1.5 years ago to an in-house role at Associated Newspapers. That's a publishing company that publishes a selection of national newspapers and magazines and websites, most of which you've probably heard of. So all of the Mail titles, Mail Online, which is rightly or wrongly the most visited news website in the world, the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday, as well as the I newspaper and website and the Metro newspaper and website. And we also publish a selection of magazines such as The New Scientist. So my role, I think anyway, is really fascinating. It's all about advising around the law that governs what you're allowed to publish, and making sure we don't run afoul of that, and then dealing with any complaints and lawsuits if people do think that we've got something wrong. Very briefly, some of the big issues are to do with libel law, which is when you've published something that damages someone's reputation and they think it's not justified, not true. So you might have seen recently there was a big libel case involving the Sun newspaper and Johnny Depp, where they published an article describing him as a wife beater, and they had to prove that claim in court, which they successfully did, which meant they could then put a huge front page calling him a wife beater again, so not quite the outcome he was looking for. There's also privacy, which we deal with a lot. So you may have seen recently in a less successful case for the media, the Mail on Sunday was sued by Meghan Markle over publishing a letter she'd written to her father, which she said was a breach of her privacy. And the court agreed on that occasion. And then we also deal with restrictions around things like reporting crime and reporting criminal cases, because there are lots of rules you have to be really careful about to check that you're not, for example, prejudicing a jury, affecting how they might find in a criminal case, which is a very, very silly thing to do. And in theory, the editor can go to jail for doing that. So we are particularly careful around that one. So that's my role. I'm happy to answer any questions about it you might have. Some tips to those who are interested in law, I would say that there's a huge variety of jobs in the legal industry, and someone who works as, for example, a criminal defence lawyer, the ones you normally see on TV standing up in court defending their clients, will have a completely different career in terms of what they do day to day, how much they're paid, as opposed to someone who is a partner in a big corporate firm in London, who might never go to court and spend their days negotiating banking contracts. So there's a huge range of things. You will need really good academic results to get into law, no matter what type of law you do. So get the best possible exam results you can. And it seems crazy, but even now applying to new jobs, they will ask me what GCSE results I got. So all of those results all the way through really count throughout your career, and every result will help to differentiate you from other candidates, because it is a competitive industry. And take advantage of any opportunities you have at school to practice your communication skills. So things like doing presentations, taking part in debate competitions, that's really helpful. And it's never too soon to get work experience. So if there's a local firm that you might be able to go and shadow someone, if you know anyone who works in law, or if you can just go down to the courts, they're all public, go and have a look, see what's going on, and you'll learn a lot just by doing that. So I'll leave it there. I've probably gone on too long, but happy to answer any questions you might have as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lizzie. That's really fascinating. So we'll, yeah, I'm sure there'll be some people thinking about some questions, so which we'll answer at the end. So now we're on to Henry. So as I said, Henry works as a sales manager for Vocus, and I guess we're just going to find out basically what is sales, Henry?
What is sales? That's a question, Lucy. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. Obviously delighted to be invited back to speak to you all. Ultimately, sales is not a career that I ever thought that I would work in. Certainly when I was at RHS, I had my sights set on from an early age. I suppose the more traditional route, going down to study something at university that ultimately would lead to a career in that industry. Now, I actually throughout my career or throughout my time at RHS knew that my talents and skills lay outside of academia. I think very much I wanted to focus more so on something that would ultimately pay well, and eventually through trying different avenues, fell into sales. So I suppose starting from the very beginning, I fell out of RHS in 2013 into retail. So started out in Marks and Spencer's, moved on to Waitrose, before ultimately deciding that this isn't for me. I wanted a change of tack, and a company of someone that I was friendly with at the time decided to take me on. That was an insurance headhunting firm. So effectively it was recruitment, but for Lloyds of London insurance brokers. So effectively it was my role to pick up the phone, develop relationships, first of all with potential customers. So, brokerages themselves, and then ultimately find them candidates and people that were within the industry that fitted the roles that they had effectively set me. From there, I decided to move and change industry, but very much stayed within sales to a furniture fit out company. So my role was more generating business opportunities for them. They had never had a new business generating arm. They relied solely on recommendations and their established status within both commercial and educational sectors. It fell on me to actually do, a little bit more of the dirty work, understanding what was happening within the commercial sector. Were office moves happening within education? Were universities or schools building new buildings, and all of that side of things. So, but then I thought, actually, I know nothing about furniture and don't really want to know anything about furniture. So, change of tack for me again. Went into the technology sector, which is where I find myself 5 years later. So, joined Vocus at the start of 2017 on what at the time was known as the Fast Track program. Now, this is effectively to take execs from knowing a little bit, or very little, should I say, about technology and sales, and actually taking them to fully established account managers within 20 months. So I started that program at the start of 2017, but actually finished it 8 months early. So January 2018, I graduated from that program and was allowed to kind of carry on. Received a little bonus and pat on the back for having done so, and was then granted the opportunity to work with some of Vocus's premier customers. So not only bringing on customers that I'd won myself, but also supporting customers that were well established within the business. Ultimately, it was my job to act as a proper technology partner for them, rather than just selling to them, really guiding and providing insight into what was happening in the industry, discussing the emerging technologies which are continuing to evolve, and really pushing things that could be game changing for their business. So after doing that for a while, I was then granted the opportunity to work in our London City office. So I was working approximately 5 minutes away from my headquarters in Southampton, was where I was living, and was asked to head up to our London City office just to provide kind of a real Vocus individual, someone who'd been through kind of the grassroots level and could offset an understanding of the culture and ideas that we were trying to implement in multiple offices. And I was there until COVID hit in March 2020, at which point it was, let's shut this office, let's go back to what we know and sell from home. So what that has evolved into is actually restructuring the business, forming or relaunching what was the Fast Track program as now the Academy program, building upon what the knowledge of me and the sales managers that are aligned to the program, what we have, and delivering that. Effectively, my viewpoint is sales isn't just something that you can just pick up and drop. It has to be treated as a vocation. It has to be treated as a science, and you have to learn it properly. Perhaps not what it looks like on the outset, but when you really get under the hood of what sales is and how it should work and how you should actually approach the sale and relationships with your customers, ultimately that's what we're there to guide. So yeah, I think just from the opportunity perspective, obviously we are recruiting quite aggressively. We have intentions of growing our headcount from currently about 30 individuals on our side of the business in the academy to about 700 over the next 5 years. So very aggressive growth plans, which myself and the team are very much looking to put in place. So yeah, I'm conscious again that I've probably waffled on for a little bit. So, but I see I don't know if Lucy's still on the call.
Thanks for that, Henry. So next up, we've got Beth. Thank you for joining us as well. We have, so you work as an occupational therapist, but yeah, we'd love to hear kind of your journey as how you got there. Not sure if you can hear me. Yeah, oh good. Yes, so occupational therapy, I'll come back to that in a minute, but I will start with my sort of strange journey towards it. When I was at RHS, I was joined by two of my siblings. They're in the same year group as me, which is quite unusual, but it was sort of quite competitive when we were thinking about leaving RHS and kind of what career paths we were going to take. And I think at the time I put a bit of pressure on myself, thinking that it needed to be, I had to go to uni and then I had to get a job and that was it. So I frantically scraped together an application, applied to a couple of unis to do hair and makeup for TV and film, but not long after I'd submitted the application, I sort of had a panic and thought, oh, actually, no, I don't think uni's right for me, at least not at the moment. So I then left RHS in 2012 and went to Colchester Institute to do an Art and Design Foundation Diploma, because I was quite creative at school, and I thought that's the route I was going to take. So I went there for a year and completed the diploma, and from there I went to Cardiff Metropolitan University to do a bachelor's degree. It was Artist Designer Maker was the name of the degree, and it was effectively 3D and surface pattern design. I really enjoyed it, but I sort of left uni and moved back to Cambridgeshire and thought, okay, so now what? I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I knew I had a nice time at uni, but I thought, you know what, the creative side of things for me is probably more of a hobby than a career. So I thought, it's all right, I'll just get a job, I'll get some money and pay off my student overdraft, and maybe I'll figure out a plan then. So I got a job with the NHS as a temporary administrator, and I thought, you know, this is a good place to kind of get some experience out in the real world and kind of see where to go from there. And I sort of just fell on my feet there, really. I started off as a referrals coordinator, working for about 11 different services within the NHS, which I really enjoyed. But again, sort of once I knew the job, I thought, okay, I'll try something new. And I was really sort of keen to know more about mental health at the time. So I got a job within the older people's mental health team for my local NHS trust. And whilst I was there, I was sort of wandering around, kind of talking to anyone about anything. And I got talking to a group of occupational therapists, and they sort of said to me, you know, do you have a plan? What's next, kind of thing. And I sort of said at the time, well, I quite like the idea of going down the art therapy route. I've got a creative background and I do like to be creative, but I also quite like the idea of working with people and helping people. And they said, oh, well, have you looked into occupational therapy? And I said, oh, no, I can't do that. I'm not academic enough, definitely not. And one of the OTs there actually happened to have a creative background and sort of encouraged me to look into it more, which I did, and I was able to get some experience shadowing various occupational therapists in different services, who then encouraged me to apply for a master's degree in occupational therapy, which I did, and successfully managed to get a place at the University of Essex. So I started that degree in 2018, 2-year course. It was supposed to be 3 years, but it was 2 years as it was a master's, so it was condensed into 2, which was good. And I did that, and then yeah, I qualified in 2020, and I spent 1 year working on an inpatient rehabilitation ward in Peterborough, which I really enjoyed, really loved. And then I thought, okay, the career is still so new and still so broad, I need to get a bit more experience. So I recently moved jobs, and now I work for Cambridgeshire County Council as an occupational therapist. And I should probably give you a bit of an overview about what I actually do. So I think it's, when people hear occupational therapy, they get a bit confused because they hear occupation, and a lot of people straight away think, oh, she helps people find work. We could do that, we could get involved with that, but occupational therapy is about working with people, helping to enable their independence, overcome any barriers, really help them achieve things that they want to do, that they value doing, what they need to do. We are placed in loads of different settings, working with children, adults, older people. We work with people with physical disabilities, learning difficulties, mental health issues, end of life care we get involved in as well. And we, yeah, like I say, work in a variety of settings. So at the moment I work in my local community, but I also cover 2 of my local prisons. So when I'm working with people, I might, for instance, go out and look at someone who's elderly and they've had a fall and they're struggling to sort of mobilise around their house. They're struggling to get themselves washed and dressed in the morning and prepare themselves a meal. So I might go out, assess the situation, gather some information, and I might be able to establish that they need some equipment to help them walk to prevent future falls. They might need some equipment in the kitchen to help them sort of help pace the activity if they're struggling, if they're getting tired, or they might need some equipment in the bathroom to help them have a wash and get dressed and be safe and maintain their independence. So they might not want care. So my job's to go out there and to see if they don't want care, then what equipment can we put in to help really maintain their independence for as long as possible. Predominantly my experience is with older people. I love working with older people. At the moment, I don't really see myself working with anyone other than older people, but I have colleagues who work in paediatrics, so they might go out into schools and help really young children develop kind of skills, their reading skills, their writing skills. They might look at special seating if they need special seating, all sorts really. It's a really broad profession, and what's lovely about it is you don't need a degree to get into it. If you're thinking uni's not really for me, I just kind of want to leave school and get out and get working, you can. A lot of local NHS trusts have apprenticeship schemes which are really good. You get sort of on the job training, but you do get the uni experience because I think it's university 1 day a week, and then you have placements in between, so you get at least 4 or 5 opportunities to experience the role within different settings, which yeah, if you don't know what you want to do but you kind of know that's the career for you, it's really lovely. Tips for you just quickly, I would just sort of echo Lizzie and say make the most of the opportunities at RHS. I remember when I was there, I did things like paired reading at the local primary school and baby swim with children coming to the swimming pool at school, and they're things I still talk about now in sort of job interviews, and if I'm mentoring students, you know, there's still things like that are still really valuable and really useful to talk about. So yeah, that's it.
Brilliant, Beth. Thank you very much. That's really, really interesting. So, so anyone that's watching, please feel free to ask our panel any questions by putting it into the chat box. I'll start with a couple of questions. So, Lizzie, is there a big difference between working in a law firm and working in an in-house legal department?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge difference. And I've obviously had experience of both now. So when you're in a law firm, obviously you're surrounded by other lawyers, and it tends to be very hierarchical in the sense that you join as a trainee, you qualify as a solicitor, and you're sort of categorized all the way through as 1 year qualified, 2 year qualified, 3 year qualified, until you hopefully get made a partner. So you'll be working in teams a lot of the time, and you'll have kind of more senior people, say you'll have a junior associate, a senior associate and a partner on the matter. So you have a lot of supervision from other lawyers. You'll also have a lot of different clients, so you need to juggle all of your different cases, matters, clients, whatever it is. And obviously the law firm is a business and you are a fee earner, so you're bringing in the money, and there's a big focus at commercial firms at least on how many, they're known as billable hours, so how much chargeable work for clients have you done, and you'll have billing targets and you'll get reports every month showing how you rank compared to you know, the other people at your level. So there's quite a lot of pressure to be very busy all the time, bringing in money. So there's pros and cons, and it's obviously nice to have support from lots of different lawyers around you who will have amazing experience and who are great to learn from. When you go in-house, obviously it varies a lot depending on the organisation that you're working for, but it will tend to be a much smaller team. Some companies only have one in-house lawyer, so you'll deal with a whole range of stuff rather than being more specialised. They might throw an employment query at you in the morning, and then they've got a contract they need you to look at in the afternoon. So you have to kind of become more bit of a jack of all trades. And also the thing that I really like about working in-house is that you're working alongside the business, so you're really embedded in whatever it is they do. So in my case, we have our legal office, but we have journalists and editors coming in and out all day, every day with the most random queries. One of the most random ones I had recently was I don't know if people remember, over the summer there was an alpaca called Geronimo who was very cute and fluffy and was being condemned to death. It was a big story, and I had a journalist come in and ask me what the laws were on TB testing of alpacas in England. It's not something that came up at law school. So I had to go away and find the random strange statutory instrument from DEFRA that gave the rules on this. So you really have no idea what could come up next. And you'll work really closely with, so if a journalist has a kind of big long-term investigation going on, you'll be involved at every step of the way, which is really cool to see kind of the work come to fruition, and when it finally gets published. That's a really great feeling, and you can see the paper in the shop the next day and think, yeah, well, I worked on that, I helped that happen. So yeah, real contrasts, but both great in their ways.
Fantastic, Lizzie. Thank you very much. That's a real insight. And now you're an expert in alpacas. Right, Henry, a question about I understand you're supporting the relaunch of the graduate programme at Vocus. What advice would you give those that potentially would apply for one of your graduate programme? on the application process?
Absolutely. So for me, a lot of it comes down to, I suppose, a couple of real core foundations that I would look for in terms of anyone looking to join us. Obviously, there has to be an element of some sort of academic success. So I would say GCSEs, I would say A-level to a certain extent is whilst it's impressive and obviously opens a lot of doors, I would suggest actually it comes down more so to personality. Resiliency is a massive thing for us. Ultimately, sales job over the first kind of 12 months when you're trying to understand and ascertain a real foundation for your career is particularly tough. You have to have that resiliency behind you. But ultimately, it's that tenacity. It's the kind of real drive to get on and just push to really get where you want to be. And actually, I suppose that is relevant in terms of any career that any pupil or current alumni would be looking to take. You have to have that tenacity to really, when you know what you want, to just grab it with both hands. And ultimately for me and anybody that we would want as part of the program, that we can really nurture and teach, like I've mentioned earlier, around the science of selling and all that side of things. It's pointless if someone's not willing to really go through and have that tenacity to get on the phones or meet with individuals and you know, push what the message is. So yeah, I suppose there's a real kind of foundation there that ultimately people have to have if they're wanting to be part of our academy.
Great, thank you, Henry. That's really helpful. So ultimately, you don't need any sales experience.
No, no, you don't. In fact, from my perspective, it would probably be more beneficial to have individuals that don't have sales experience. That way, people can be molded, people can be taken, and you know, what I would say is people that have worked in sales and have worked in a number of organizations within sales will pick up bad habits. And fortunately, when you haven't had that experience, you don't have those bad habits. We can almost create an individual who, I suppose, is built from the ground up, has that foundation and that core knowledge of actually how to do it, understanding the science of the sales without knowing, or thinking, right, I already know the answer to this. It's taking individuals right through that process and pushing them through and establishing something. And actually for us as a leadership team and me as an individual who's gone through exactly that same process, I would take more pride in really building an individual up. So no, sales experience is not required, but I would say fundamentally, if you've got those principles that I've mentioned just before around the tenacity, the resiliency and the determination, realistically, provided you have a level of intellect that you can understand and take forwards what we're creating as a message here, then yeah, I would suggest that those are the key ingredients for success.
Great, thank you, Henry. I guess that just describes the perfect RHS pupil, really, doesn't it?
I'd like to think so.
Beth, can we come to you? You said that essentially there are NHS trusts that offer training. Where would someone that was interested be able to find out more information about the opportunities in NHS trusts?
Probably there's the Royal College of Occupational Therapists website is probably the best place to go to sort of provide some information about the best routes into the profession. I'm sure if you looked at your local NHS trust websites as well, then they might have a bit more information. But I think the best thing to do is just kind of ask anyone you know that works for the NHS, you know, that in your local area, ask them because they might know. If anything, when I was at RHS, I didn't ask enough questions throughout the whole thing. And now in my career, I ask every question that possibly pops into my head. And I think that's how I've managed to kind of work in so many different areas across the NHS, because I just ask, and then people are so willing to give you the experience.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Beth. So therefore we can come to you then if anyone's got any questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. So back to you, Lizzie. I just wondered, so is it, obviously you started out in a law firm, but do companies, sort of big companies like Associated Newspapers, do they advertise graduate roles? Can you go through the legal system, so the legal training, and then you're able to go into in-house, or is that something that people sort of move into after they've qualified?
So it's a good question, because lots of people don't know. It is very rare still to go straight into an in-house role, and that's because there are certain kind of boxes that you need to tick in terms of experience during your training to qualify as a solicitor, and most in-house teams won't be able to offer all of that. So when you train at a firm, you'll move through normally 4, could be 5 or 6 different departments to get different experience. And you might do a secondment to an in-house role during that training, but it's unlikely you can do all your training. Some big companies do offer it, and it's something that started relatively recently, so it might become more common. But it's, yeah, definitely not the norm.
Great, thank you, and thanks, Lizzie. That's really helpful, actually. Henry, isn't sales pressurised with all the targets? Do you have to be like a confident individual in order to go into sales?
Yes, you do. There is pressure in sales. Ultimately, it's a sales environment, and there's a number to hit. I think, like Lizzie was mentioning earlier, ultimately there are levels that we have to hit to sustain a business and make sure that we are a profitable business. So yes, there are pressures associated with that. What I would say is that as an academy and as a leadership team, we understand and can empathise what it looks like in terms of an individual starting out their career. It's not going to be bang day one, okay, you have to hit this target or it's game over for you. We understand there's a real period of exponential growth. So we would expect individuals to start off small, and we have realistic targets around that. Ultimately, those targets grow over time until we understand and the execs who are part of the team are fully established. So yes, there is pressure, but it's not as kind of excruciating as perhaps you might think. Certainly within the correct environments anyway. Of course, I can only speak for Vocus where I'm currently at, but I would imagine that there are certainly companies out there that do have very, very tough targets and are kind of more cutthroat than certainly we are. So on the whole, yes, it is a pressurized environment, but ultimately the 3 pillars that I've mentioned already should really create an individual that thrives under that pressure rather than buckles.
Great, thanks, Henry. That's really helpful. So all those confident people out there, they need to head down the sales route.
Yeah, I would suggest so. Yeah.
Okay. So Beth, I'm guessing that every day is different in your job. So what's the best thing about your job? You're muted, Beth. You're still on mute. No, that's fine. That's fine, Beth. Maybe the system's having a moment. That's fine. Don't worry. So just a final question for each of you, and hopefully we can sort out Beth. So I was wondering about salary scales. A lot of pupils ask me about what the starting salaries are in your various industries. So if we can start with Lizzie, be interested to know what the salary scales are. You know, what would you expect when you first finish university, up to sort of middle management? That would be really helpful.
So I'll speak to my experience, which is working in a commercial firm in London. So across the industry as a whole, this is obviously towards the higher end. If you're going to be doing kind of high street work, which, you know, sort of divorce, wills, conveyancing, that sort of thing would be different, and criminal work again is very different. But you would expect going into a kind of mid-sized firm in London to earn about 40 a year in your first year of your training, and then that goes up quite significantly once you qualify. So in your first year as a qualified solicitor, at a London firm, you could earn anything from 50 to 100. The US firms are now paying some of their newly qualified solicitors well into the six figures, which is a bit mad, and you will pay for it in the time you are required to give. But I think the top paying US firm in London now pays about 140 grand a year to newly qualified solicitors. So yeah, it can be a bit crazy. But again, your work-life balance, if you're getting a salary like that, will be none. So it depends what your priority is.
Great, thanks, Lizzie. I've just had a question actually. It said, is working as a legal advisor a rewarding job to do?
It absolutely is. Thank you for the question. Yeah, so I guess I kind of touched on this previously, but a couple of the kind of most rewarding things I find in my job are helping journalists get their story from that first tip to actually being published. So there are all sorts of things we help with. For example, if journalists want to do an undercover investigation, there are kind of regulatory rules that apply to that. So you have to kind of tick a lot of boxes before you can't just go in somewhere and start secretly filming people, not telling them you're a journalist. Like that's that's not allowed. You know, so you have to show before you start that you've got really clear evidence that there's some sort of wrongdoing going on. There's something that you want to uncover that it's going to be in the public interest to publish about. So, you know, some sort of wrongdoing, incompetence, endangering public safety, wasting public money, those kinds of things. Criminal wrongdoing, obviously. And then you have to kind of plan very carefully how you're going to go about your investigation and how you're going to record everything that you do, so you've got it all to back it up if we get a complaint later. So some of those investigations can take months to get from the first conversation to actually going in the paper. So seeing that actually come to fruition is really rewarding. And we do a lot of work as well around press freedom. So it could be trying to influence policy. There was a consultation recently about new legislation that's called the Online Safety Bill, which is to do with regulating content online, basically, which, you know, has been big in the news over the past couple of years. And we put in a submission to that, and I actually went and gave evidence to a House of Lords Select Committee about it, which is terrifying. But yeah, that's really cool to think that you might be actually influencing policy changes and law changes. And we also do a lot of work banding together with other media organisations. So, for example, there was a case recently which people might have seen in the news about the Sheikh of Dubai, who had had some very contentious custody proceedings in the UK family courts. And one of the findings of the family court judge was that he had illegally spied on his ex-wife and her lawyers, one of whom is a member of the House of Lords. So pretty shocking revelations from a head of state that is supposedly an ally of ours. The problem for the press was that family court proceedings are generally private because, you know, they're to do with people's family, children are involved. But obviously we thought that in this situation there was enough public interest in everyone knowing about this that those proceedings should be allowed to be reported. So Associated, along with the BBC, Sky, the Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian, everyone basically grouped together to challenge those reporting restrictions, and were successful, which meant that everyone could report the case, and that news came out. So working on matters like that is hugely rewarding as well.
Great, thanks, Lizzie. Beth, hopefully we've got you back. So firstly, I just wanted to obviously just ask you again, what's the best thing about your job? And then perhaps you can also start talk to us about starting salaries and maybe up to middle management.
Yeah, so hopefully you can hear me. I've got my button back now. Thankfully, being tech savvy isn't part of my job description. Best part of my job, I think, like you mentioned before, no day for me is the same, which I love. I did, you know, about 3 years working in an office, sat at my desk, and it wasn't for me. I didn't really enjoy it. So what's lovely is I've got such a variety. Every person I see, whether it's on the ward or in the community, is completely different. You know, everyone has their story. That's the other reason I love working with older people. I love having a chat. I love that I can then help them in some way. Sometimes it is just having a chat because they're lonely. Other times it's, you know, putting in all sorts of equipment that just changes their life. The other day I went to see someone who was quite elderly, late 80s. They had Parkinson's. They hadn't left the house in 3 months because their walking wasn't particularly safe. So I went out, assessed them, found a piece of equipment that I thought would be suitable, went outside, trialled the piece of equipment, and he just said that it had changed his life because he could actually go outside and walk again. And he was someone that would walk his dog every day for miles for years and years and years, and then because of a decline in his mobility he couldn't, and he didn't think he would again, but now he can. So that for me is just really, really lovely. In terms of salary, it varies massively from NHS to council to private sectors. Based on my experience, the sort of starting salary with the NHS, you start as a band 5 occupational therapist, and that's around £24,000 per year. And then you sort of get increments as the years progress, depending on which band you then move to. For the council, it's slightly different. You're not in bands the same as you are in the NHS. It's named something different, but the starting salary for the council is about £33,000, so it's quite different. But it really depends on where you want to work, whether you want to do healthcare or social care, and sort of the different opportunities available. What's nice with both social care and healthcare is that they have the opportunity to do rotation, so you can do one role. So I could be an OT on like a ward for the elderly at a main hospital. I could do 6 months there, and then I could rotate and I could do inpatient mental health. Then I could rotate and I could do outpatient. So I might see people that come in and they need, we sometimes get involved with hand therapy. So if you've had a bad break to your hand and it's your dominant hand and you need to use the computer, or you need to write, or you need to drive, then you might come and see an OT in an outpatient clinic and we can help out there. So yeah, it really depends sort of when you qualify. It depends what route you want to take. The other thing I wanted to mention that I love about my job is, particularly with getting the master's degree, I'm not entirely sure what it's like in terms of if you do the apprenticeship, because I haven't done it, but in terms of getting the master's, I know that with my qualification it's recognised in most countries. So I'm planning to do kind of a year where I am at the moment, but then I'm hoping to travel. I'm looking at Australia or Canada, because it's a really highly regarded profession as well, which is amazing. And that was another thing that kind of drew me to going down the master's route rather than any other route. But I just think it's a really, really lovely profession. I'd never heard of it at school, which is why I was keen to kind of jump on here and have a chat about it today, because it's lovely. It's really, really broad. If you like working with people, it's great. If you're creative, it's great. If you want to work in hospital, if you want to work in community, if you want to work in a school, if you want to work in mental health, physical health, yeah, it's just a really, really lovely profession.
Oh, Beth, thank you. You can clearly see your passion for it, definitely. So Henry, yeah, starting salaries, middle management salaries would be really good. So how well does sales pay? I guess it has targets and bonuses, maybe?
Yeah. Sales, provided you go about it in the right way, is an incredibly lucrative career. Realistically, there is no kind of set pay scale. Ultimately, sales is based on commission. Anyone who's coming into sales shouldn't view it necessarily as, oh, well, what's my basic salary? The only time that your basic salary will ultimately matter should be the first 12 months, where you are kind of at that bottom of the exponential growth. Starting salaries with Vocus for a graduating exec would be, I think it's a starting salary of 20,000. Realistically, you should be earning 70,000 within 3 years. Ultimately, after that, moving up that pay scale and moving up that chain, it is limitless. It's based on the relationships you have. It's based on the customers and the amount of business that they are putting through us and ultimately through yourself. But I would say within 5 years you should be six figures plus. But it really is kind of endless. I mean, I've seen some pay slips that are obscene. I've been fortunate enough to develop relationships with individuals within the business that are really high up, from an account director perspective, and I've seen some wage slips that are 140,000 in a month. So it's it really is kind of endless, and this is the thing. Ultimately, sales isn't portrayed as a glamorous industry, but provided you get in, you learn how it works, and really you kind of strive to develop the strongest possible relationships. Now, ultimately, that does take time, but what I would say is you can get to the top quite quickly.
I think everyone here went, "Woo!"
You should have seen me when I saw that payslip. So yeah.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. Brilliant. Well, that probably concludes this evening. So firstly, I'd like to thank our 3 speakers. Thank you to Lizzie, Henry and Beth. Thank you to Elaine for doing all our technical stuff, and for Katie for implementing everything and giving me all the notes that I needed. So thank you very much, everyone. If you want to essentially be part of this, then please let us know. And we'll hope to see you next term with our next one. Thanks very much. Bye.